Hello everybody and welcome back to another My Porch Prints tutorial. Today we are continuing our 3 different ways series, and for today we are making covers. So covers for your junk journal 3 different ways, and we are going to be making it with just paper and cardboard for one. The next one is going to be a fabric cover, and the third one is going to be an envelope cover. So those are the 3 that we are making today. And we're going to go ahead and start with the one that is just paper and cardboard. So for that, I've gone ahead and printed out some papers for the outside and inside of the cover. Today we are only doing the outside for this one. So just these 3 pieces of chipboard that I went ahead and purchased online, so they were already pre-cut. And I'm going to go ahead and cut out a spine from these. So these pieces are, I believe, 5.5 by 8.5 roughly cut pieces. And so we are going to be creating a 2-inch spine. So I'll go ahead and just mark off where 2 inches is on the top and bottom so that I can have a 2-inch by 8.5 inch spine for my book. Just using an X-Acto knife to cut that out. And mine was a little bit messy, but that's okay because we're covering it up with paper anyway, so don't worry if it's not perfectly straight. So for this, we are going to kind of just arrange them. This is how it is going to work: your front and back cover, and then the spine in between. And I'm going to begin by using my cover papers, which are these little pretty sort of shabby pink pinstripe papers, and links to all of the materials will be down in the description box below. So if you're interested in using exactly what I am, you can go ahead and find it down there. And we're going to go ahead and layer these papers one on top of the other. I usually give it about an inch and a half to 2 inches of overlap. I'm not super specific with how I do it, so you can measure if you want, but I kind of just eyeball it. And I would recommend gluing them together before laying all your pieces out so that they don't move so much. I kind of figured this out a little bit too late, but for now I'm just kind of placing them to see how much of an edge I want them to have. I usually give them about an inch parameter around the entire book, and I usually have them separated by about 1/4 inch of space in between the covers and the spine, just like this. And then I'm taking a pencil and sort of marking where they are so that when I go to glue them down, I can just lay them along the grid. Just like this. So I'm going to remove those, and here is where I am going to go ahead and glue my 2 pieces of paper together. Again, I would recommend doing this part before marking everything out, just so that it's a little more accurate. But if you forget, it's okay, you can do it here too. Alright, so now that those are glued together and not going anywhere, I'm going to go ahead and glue down my little pieces of chipboard using some FABRITAC and also a brush to sort of smooth them out so I don't get any bumps or wrinkles. And chipboard tends to sort of need more glue than paper just because it's, I don't know, it just sort of soaks up the glue a little bit more. So make sure that you use plenty of glue when you're doing this. Alright, when that's done, we're going to go ahead and cut off the corners at an angle. So how I do this is I usually start by just kind of cutting them diagonally across, and then I will go ahead and sort of angle them almost like a little triangle, if that makes sense. I'll kind of show you again later when we do our second cover. My camera accidentally stopped recording this part, so I didn't capture it here, but if you stay and watch the third cover we make, you'll see it in a little more detail. So basically you're just cutting sort of an angled line at each of the corners and then folding them all in and gluing them down. Just like this. And then I'm going to be taking a bone folder and just sort of creating a crease here, just sort of accenting the crease so that it will fold easily around that spine. And just like that. your cover is finished. And you can decorate this however you'd like, and I will be showing you how we will cover up the chipboard on the inside in our next 3 ways tutorial, but that is going to finish our first cover. Alright, for this second one, you may have seen, like this may look familiar if you have seen our Jane Austen journal tutorial. I'm going to be taking a cereal box and cutting out just the center piece from it, which is about 7.5 by 13.5 inches naturally. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut off all those borders. Just like that. And then I'm going to be folding it in half, and this sort of center line is going to help us make our spine. So it really depends on how wide you want yours. I ended up trying to do just 1 inch by giving it a 1/2 inch on either side of that crease, but I ended up later changing it to 2 inches. So if that's what you want to do, you're going to want to do 1 inch on either side of the spine, and that should save you a little bit of trouble later. So just go ahead and mark off 1 inch on either side of that spine on the top and bottom of the cover, just like this. And then we're going to be folding along those lines. You can connect the lines if it helps you fold a little easier. I just, again, sort of eyeballed it and creased right along those lines, and that should make a spine. Just like that. Flattening it out a little bit if it gets a little bit of bend to it. And next we are going to grab our fabric. This is just a scrap piece of fabric that I had. You can use anything you'd like. And laying that out, I'm going to be giving it a 1 inch border, although I would actually recommend, after going through all this, doing more like a 1/2 inch border. It ended up being a little too long for my taste, so I would recommend a 1/2 inch instead. And then laying everything out, I'm going to be grabbing the fabric for the inside of the cover. And I have this scrap piece of lace that I got from a thrift store. So I'm just going to be cutting around the perimeter, since I can kind of see through to the other piece and see how long it needs to be so that they match up. And we're just going to be sewing up 3 edges of this so that we can slide the cardboard in and sew up the final edge. Just like this, sewing everything up, and you should have like a little pocket. I decided to use sort of the zigzag stitch because it's just kind of my favorite stitch and I like how it looks. And this may look familiar to you if you've ever created a book cover before. It's the exact same sort of idea, just sort of sewing up all 3 sides, tucking the cardboard in, and then sewing the final side. And I made sure to shake my cardboard down towards like the bottom of the stitch so that everything would be tight. Although again, because I had that 1 inch border, I found that it was a little loose, so I decided to sew in closer to the book so that the cardboard wasn't like moving around freely. I wanted it to be pretty solid, just like this. And then I went ahead and cut off any of the extra on that border that I felt was a little too long. Just like that. And went ahead and made my spine into a 2 inch spine instead, because I thought it would fit the pages better. And this is how it looks when it is finished. Alright, so that's going to be it for that one. For the second one, we are going to be creating an envelope folder, and we're also going to be trying out binder rings to bind it. So I ended up grabbing binder rings that were a little too small, so make sure that you grab the 2 inch ones, not these really tiny like 1 inch ones. And then going back to our chipboard, which is again 5.5 by 8.5, and we are grabbing this piece that we cut our spine from earlier. I'm going to use this to create the spine for this one, which is a 1.5 inch spine. So 1.5 by 8.5 inches. And then we're also going to be cutting our envelope from a piece of chipboard. So this is going to be like a 1 inch edge, I guess. And then I went ahead and marked it right at that 1 inch as well as creating the point of the envelope about 5.5 inches down the page, or 4.5, excuse me, 4.5 inches down the page. And then about 2 inches in from the edge on the long side. I know this isn't quite making sense. If you're watching the video, it should be kind of falling together. But just kind of looking, you can make yours a little bit smaller if you want more of your cover to show, or larger if you want less of the cover to show. It's kind of up to you. And once we have all of our pieces, we are going to find the paper that we want to use for the inside. I'm going to do the inside first. And we are going to trace around all of our pieces on that sort of inside paper that we're using. And we're just going to cut all of those out and glue them down to the cardboard pieces. All right, and for the actual envelope piece, it's very important that you have it facing the right way. If you didn't cut yours like absolutely precise, and I know mine's not, I know it's like one of the angles is slightly longer than the other one, which is fine. It doesn't affect the way the book looks, but it will affect it if you accidentally trace it and then try to glue it on. It won't fit properly, so make sure that you have it facing inwards and then trace around it that way, so that when you glue the paper on top of it, it matches up properly. And again, doing that for the final cover. And you can use different pieces of paper if you want. I just decided to make all of mine the same. And then using that FABRITAC glue, just gluing everything down. Again, being generous with the amount of glue we're using. All right, now that everything is glued down and dry, I went ahead and chose these papers for the outside of the cover. And we're going to lay these down like longwise instead of horizontally, so vertically. And again, having about an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches of crossover. And I made sure that I glued these down first this time before laying everything out and tracing around it. And I tried to be a little bit more careful with measuring things so that nothing was too crooked or anything like that. So yeah, 2.5 inches of crossover here. Marking where they are so that I can line them up perfectly. And then gluing them together with that FABRITAC glue. And then laying out all of my pieces, I decided to give it a 1-inch border around all of them. I ended up sort of getting spacey again and didn't really measure. So I will have to cut off a little bit of extra later. Again, if you want to measure and save yourself having so many scraps, that's probably a good idea. I was very distracted today and made several mistakes, but it's okay because, you know, we're going to pull a Bob Ross here and just call them happy accidents because it all worked out in the end. Alright, so here measuring out my 1-inch border around the entire piece, marking them off. And this is going to become the border that we fold sort of inside to create like a decorative interior border, I suppose. If you wanted to simplify things, again, you could just kind of cut them out and glue them on like we did the inside cover, but this adds like a nice decorative border that just makes the project, I think, a little more interesting. So cutting off all of that extra. Oh, and measuring out the point also to 1 inch. Just like that. All right, now that that's done, here's where we are going to cut those corners, same as we did in the first project, but this time I was able to film it. So cutting them and then cutting out like a little like wide angled triangle, I suppose you could call it. Just like that. and doing that to both of these corners. Just like so. And then here I am cutting one angled slit sort of towards the middle of this crease. And it should look like that when you are done. Doing it again to the other side, same idea. Just like that. And then we are going to fold all of these sides in and then glue them down. Just like that to create a little border. And here you can see the white through here. I didn't think about this, unfortunately, ahead of time. If I wanted to, I could have added like a strip of paper underneath this spine and like glued it down so that it would have blended in better. So I would recommend that if you have like really high contrast. Luckily, my papers are pretty like light colored, so the white doesn't stand out too much. So I'm just going to leave it this time around, but that is something to think about beforehand if you are wanting to hide the white inside the crease. And next we're going to go ahead and just sort of cut away like a little bit of this paper here so that we can fold in this border over the spine. And mine was a little too wide, so I decided to cut away any extra so that it fit perfectly, like so. And then adding a little glue, we're just going to glue that down like that. And do it again to the other side. And for the envelope piece, I went ahead and again cut off a little extra right where the sort of crease is around the spine so that it is flush with the envelope piece. Just like that. And we're going to be doing a little bit of basic folding here. We're going to start with this edge and just sort of fold it over the envelope until it meets the actual chipboard itself, like that. And again with the other side. And then from the edge to the point, we're gonna fold over this side like this. Again, right up against that chipboard. And one last time with this other side. And again, because my measurements weren't absolutely perfect, there was sort of a little bit of too much paper on this side, so I kind of just tucked it under and pinched it and folded it and pushed on it until it looked right. It's okay to kind of hide those little things under the fold. It won't stick out too much or matter too much. You can always cut away a little extra if you need to, things like that. And pre-folding it like this is going to help us when we are gluing it down, just to make the process a little faster and easier. Go ahead and add that glue and then just fold along those pre-folded edges like this. And there you go. This part of the journal is done. Just like that. I think this one actually turned out really nice and I'm really happy with it. All right, so again, doing that same idea to the front cover. Again, measuring about 1 inch of a border around the cover and then gluing it down. And we're going to be cutting off those corners the exact same way, sort of a straight cut, and then doing a sort of wide angle triangle. Just like that to each of the corners. And again, they don't have to be absolutely perfect, it's all right. They'll still look fine in the end. Right, just folding those down and gluing them, and I ended up folding mine so that the short sides were glued down first, which is different than how I did the inside cover. I wasn't really paying attention to that. So if that really bothers you, you can definitely pay closer attention and make sure they are folded the exact same way. But I think it looks pretty much the same, so it doesn't really bother me. And I'm just going to leave them as is. And this is how the journal will come together. And we will be adding the binder rings to the left side. So I'm going to go ahead and poke a couple of holes using my CROP-A-DILE for this. You can use an awl as well if you don't have a CROP-A-DILE that can go through such thick chipboard. And full transparency here, again, I was so spaced out this day that when I measured, I forgot to measure like from the top down. I just measured in how far I wanted the holes to be, which was like 1/4 inch, so that they didn't match up. And yes, I was a little upset with myself here, but it's okay. We're just gonna go ahead and hide it by using a little bit of lace ribbon and just sort of gluing that down along the border and repunching our holes through all of that. It's okay to make mistakes. You know, you kind of learn from them, and sometimes things end up looking better because of it. I actually really like the lace border, so, you know, happy accidents again. So starting over here, being much more careful and measuring it from the top down as well as the left side in to make sure that they match up exactly. And I was also being careful to check and make sure that I wasn't accidentally overlapping with the previous hole, because we don't want that hole to be too big or weaken the structure of the page. So trying to keep some distance between the previous holes and the new ones. And then just punching through everything again. And this time they do line up, so we can go ahead and proceed. I'm going to be using these little just basic binder clips for this, and I realized that the first ones I had were much too small. You have to use the bigger one because the way that the rings fit, they don't actually, like, because of the curve, the pages can't go the full circumference of the ring, so you need a bigger ring. So you'll need a 2-inch ring for a 1.5 inch spine. I don't really know how the math all works out, I just know that is what works. So if you're planning to do this, that is my recommendation here. And you can always use these rings to like add little like ribbons or pretty charms to them to make them just a little bit prettier with the journal. And to close the journal, we are going to be using these little like VELCRO stickers that we got online. Again, I will have a link for these down in the description box. And I just went ahead and lined up the cover, making sure it was aligned on the top and bottom, and then added the 2 pieces of VELCRO. And it should hold the journal together just like that. All right, so that is all 3 covers finished. I hope that you found this video helpful or at least entertaining, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.